President Trump is warning that Iran better negotiate a fair deal as U.S. military forces building up now in the Mideast region. Lucas Tomlinson is live at the White House with the latest on this. Hi, Lucas.
Good afternoon, Aisha. Iran's foreign minister says his country will complete a draft of a potential nuclear agreement and submit it to the United States within the next 2 to 3 days. And officials say, depending on what's on that paper, will determine whether or not President Trump orders strikes against Iran.
They better negotiate a fair deal. They better negotiate. You know, the people of Iran are a lot different than the leaders of Iran. And it's very sad situation. But 32,000 people were killed over a relatively short period of time.
Right now, there's over 100 refueling planes either in the Middle East or heading there. That's double the amount used during the B-2 strike during Operation Midnight Hammer. And 15 of those tankers are in the Azores right now in the Atlantic, which were used to refuel the B-2s during the strike on Iran's nuclear facilities in June. And let's not forget the Guided missile submarine USS Georgia, which launched 30 cruise missiles at Isfahan as part of Midnight Hammer. That was the third nuclear site. That submarine likely still lurking underwater in theater, loaded with 154 Tomahawks on board with a 1,000-mile range. And the USS Gerald R. Ford carrier strike group passed through Gibraltar yesterday. She's still 3 to 4 days away from the Eastern Med in the Suez Canal. Ford deployed last June. This deployment might end up being 11 months long. In the Eastern Med, her destroyers could help protect Israel if necessary. The Lincoln Strike Group remains on station in the Arabian Sea. Here's General Jack Keane on what he thinks needs to happen.
If we do nothing, Iran begins to recover. They'll continue to support the proxies. They'll rebuild their ballistic missile program, which they've been doing since June, by the way. They'll attempt to recover their nuclear enterprise, and things will just go back to normal.
Iran's foreign minister also said his country will not suspend uranium enrichment and claims the U.S. side has not asked for it. Something to watch in the days ahead as we await that Iranian proposal. Aisha?
Okay, Lucas Tomlinson live for us. Lucas, thank you.
Barack Obama said that aliens are real. Have you seen any evidence of non-human visitors to Earth?
Well, he gave classified information. He's not supposed to be doing that. You know?
So aliens are real?
Well, I don't know if they're real or not. I can tell you he gave classified information. He's not supposed to be doing that. He made a big mistake. He took it out of classified information.
Okay, a lot of people saw that and thought, did the president just all but confirm what Barack Obama said? He is taking aim, though, at Obama for allegedly disclosing classified UFO information. And he's also now vowing to release all government files on extraterrestrial life. For more on this, let's bring in Florida Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna. Great to have you. I want to put up on the screen here, this is where the Poly Market stands right now. About 14% chance that the U.S. will confirm aliens are real by 2027. Not very high. I do want to ask you, because the interest is very high, and it peaked when the president said this. And he obviously heard that because he's releasing these files. What do you expect to see in the files that he's releasing? And shouldn't we be trying to get some of these classified files declassified?
Look, for a very long time, Aisha, we've been working very hard to push forward transparency and disclosure, at least in the information that we believe, based on our classified briefings, witness testimony, and the things that have come out from our hearings, whether it's footage, etc., that there are simply some things we cannot explain and some technologies that exist potentially that are not created by mankind. And so what I will tell you is, from an issue and a lens of national security, we are going to be working very closely with the White House. I have meetings set up next week with not just the FBI, but the Department of War to push for a very specific list of documents. I believe it's over 20 documents specifically that we know that they are housing, that they have previously denied us access to as members of Congress, which should alarm every American, but will be similar to some of the footage that you've seen us release from my task force, as well as the footage that you have up on your screen right now. And so I think it's really up to the American people to decide what they believe on this topic, but based on the evidence that we have seen, there's definitely some interesting things we cannot explain.
Well, you know, I listened to your interview with Joe Rogan, which I think everyone should run and listen to right after this show. It's fascinating. And there were so many moments when my jaw dropped, because you said that you had seen evidence, because of where you sit, you know, in Congress, that you've seen evidence of interdimensional beings. Can you elaborate on that? And just for people at home, to me, my mind goes to everything, not little green aliens, but borderline religious.
Yeah, I think that this can definitely bring to question many things. And again, I would encourage everyone to go listen to that Joe Rogan episode, because I don't think that we have enough time to go into it on this segment. But what I will tell you is those terms, interdimensional beings, are actually terms that the witnesses that we've interviewed have referred to whatever these things are as. And so we are going off of testimony. And then also, I can slightly allude to it right now, but we still are waiting on the official D-class. But once we receive it, I will be actually sharing with the American people some stuff that was briefed to us directly by the FBI and be able to share more information on that. And so based on the tech, if you look at how these things are moving, some people will say, well, this could potentially be drones or advanced technologies from other adversarial governments, which is exactly why we should be able to access this information and to debunk that if possible. But there are certain things that we can't explain. And I was not the only member of Congress that saw that. Many members on my task force actually came into the briefing, as well as other individuals that are currently looking into this. And so we will be revealing that information. We will be ensuring that the declassification order by the president is followed through on. And again, I'm not telling people what to believe, but yeah, it's definitely hard to explain.
I think what's hard for some people, and I get this, some people are deeply religious out there, no matter what their faith is, and you're a Christian, and I think some people are embracing it, but also confronting this idea, like, how do I square this with my faith if there's either something else out there? But you're saying that it could actually maybe mesh with your faith.
Well, I think that the Bible's pretty clear that humanity was not its only creation. And I'm not saying that these are, items that were addressed in the Bible, but it is interesting that if you look at historical context and also documents that have existed throughout time in humanity, and we can get probably into a whole nother topic on that, but you read into the book of Enoch, a lot of this advanced technologies is potentially referenced then. And so all I'm saying is that from a national security perspective, we, the American people, deserve to know what the government has. They shouldn't be hiding it, and that's what we're here to push for.
Yeah, we do. I want to talk about the SAVE Act and the fight for election integrity. Y'all are pushing for this act to be passed through the Senate. The Democrats are doing something completely different. I don't know if you caught this, but Sheila Nix, the former chief of staff to Kamala Harris's failed presidential bid, is now heading up this organization to try to push for voting through cell phones, which raises all sorts of security questions. But the Democrats are saying, hey, we use it for everything. We use it for banking. Why not voting? What do you think?
Yeah, the Democrats have been doing everything possible to ensure that elections are not secure. And then at the same time, they're saying that President Trump is trying to steal the midterms, which is obviously false. But the point is that when you have an entire party that's depending on open, illegal advocacy and basically wanting to give mass amnesty to over 20 million illegal immigrants here in this country, you can see who their voting base is, right? Because we know that Democrats as a whole are actually very supportive of the Save America Act. And so what we're going to be doing, and I think President Trump was very clear about this, and you'll probably hear about it at the State of the Union, but voter ID is a must pass. It's going to secure our elections. It is a non-negotiable. And Leader Thune has a very big decision to make. Is he going to do the right thing and embrace a standing filibuster, or is he going to deny the will of the American people? And there's other ways to get around this. We could put this in FISA, which is a must-pass reauthorization, but I do not believe that Democrats want to secure elections, and it's for reasons that I think people can put two and two together on.
Okay. Before I let you go, I got to get your thoughts on Iran. There's a huge buildup of military assets taking place right now in the Mideast region. It's clearly sending a signal to Iran to get its act together and come to an agreement. Do you think we're going to see Iran come to a deal, or are we going to war?
I believe that the president will take a very measured, level-headed approach. And I will say this, that he's still the only president in my lifetime who's not engaged in a kinetic conflict. And so I don't believe that he's going to push for war first. However, I'd like to remind the American people that the Iranian regime has on a number of occasions made death threats against our president. And so we are dealing with people that are not necessarily I think, level-headed individuals as a whole. And so I think the president has made his position clear, as you saw previously, that he's not playing games, that they do need to come to the negotiating table. And I will say that this also is coming at an interesting time with his peace board, because we know that some of Iran's friendly allies are now on that peace board and also are encouraging them to work with the president. And so I believe that there will be a deal met, but I also would publicly say to the world, do not play with President Trump. He knows what he's doing, and you cannot cross him.
Okay, Congresswoman Ana Paulina Luna, great to have you on this Saturday. Come back soon, and we can't wait to see what you guys find out on possibly other life forms out there. We'll see.
Thank you.
Hey everyone, I'm Emily Campagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.